In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the new features available in Emonitor version 4.1. In addition to some under-the-hood improvements in security, Emonitor version 4.1 is now fully supported on Windows 10, Windows 11, and Windows Server 2019. But the improvements don't stop there. Emonitor 4.1 also adds new features to the Emonitor EM Utility that significantly expand and simplify your options for importing data from Rockwell's Dynamics 1444 series of online vibration monitors. Previously, Emonitor EM could only import spectrum and time waveform data types from the Dynamics 1444. This required you to configure a separate OPC client utility to import overall and FFT band measurements to Emonitor. Now in Emonitor 4.1, you have access to all of this data from within the Emonitor EM utility, enabling you to keep all of those measurements synchronized and on the same schedule. And in addition to acquiring data on a scheduled interval, the Emonitor EM utility now gives you the ability to easily acquire Dynamics 1444 data based on a triggered event, without having to rely on complex logics programming and placing a significant resource burden on the controller. In Emonitor 4.1, you need only define a trigger tag in the controller. The Emonitor EM utility can then simply monitor that trigger tag and automatically initiate data collection only when the desired state is detected. This makes it extremely easy to configure data collection only under the specific operating conditions that you're interested in monitoring, whether that's something simple like only when the machine is running, or something more complex, like when a specific process or speed threshold is active. Let's take a look and see how that works. First, we're going to launch the Emonitor EM utility. And as with the previous version, we have to log in with an Emonitor admin level credential to proceed. Once we're logged in, we can click the New button. And now that the extraction wizard has opened up, we can see we have a couple of new collection methods. The scheduled collection method functions much the same as it did in Emonitor 4.0. But now in 4.1, we have some additional options. So leaving the scheduled collection method selected, I'll go ahead and click Next. And I will select my 1444 from the list and add the device. And I will click Next. Now you'll notice when I expand the 1444 and the channels underneath that, in addition to spectrum and time waveform data, I also have access now to map overall and band frequency data into the Emonitor database. And this works just the same as it did in the previous version with spectrum and waveform data. I simply select the measurements I'm interested in, then I expand the Emonitor database. I can choose the item I want to map to, and I click Auto Map. The measurements are automatically created with their appropriate locations. Then I click Next, and if the Dynamics 1444 is configured to also provide phase data, I can select that option here. And now I have the ability to specify the interval that I want to collect data on. So in this case, maybe I'll say every 1 hour. And I can save the extraction by giving it a unique name. And then I can click Finish. Now I can start the extraction to begin collecting this scheduled data on my 1 hour interval. Now let's take a look at how easy it is to configure a triggered data collection. Again, we're going to click the New button, and this time we'll select Triggered. Now, when we select Triggered, we only have the ability to pull data out of the live data buffer and not the demand data buffer, whereas if we were using scheduled data collection, we can extract data from either buffer. So in this case, we're going to use Triggered from the live data buffer, and we'll click Next. Now here we have to specify our OPC parameter settings. So this utility uses an OPC connection to monitor a specified trigger tag, and that can be on a local OPC server that's installed on the same workstation with Emonitor, or a remote OPC server on a different workstation. In this case, we're going to just do it on the same workstation. Now if I wanted to monitor an OPC tag on a remote OPC server, I would click the Select button here next to server name, and I would indicate that I'm going to configure a remote OPC server. But in the interest of keeping this as simple as possible, we were just going to leave it as a local OPC server. Now under OPC topic, we'll click the Select button. And here we can select the specific OPC topic where we'll be able to find our triggers. In this case, I only have one OPC topic. Now I need to import the trigger tag data from the ACD project file. Now, in order to do this successfully, you do have to have Logix Designer or Studio 5000 installed on the same workstation with Emonitor, and the version must match the version of the ACD file that you're going to do the tag import on. Note that Logix Designer does not have to be activated in order for this to work. It just has to be installed. So I'll click the Browse button next to ACD file, and I'll navigate to where my ACD file is located. You have a message here that it'll take a brief minute or two while the tags are being imported. And when the process completes, you can see that we have a success dialog box indicating that our tags are imported successfully. So we'll click OK to acknowledge, and we'll click Next. Much like the scheduled data collection, now we have to tell Emonitor EM where to find the Dynamics 1444s that we're going to collect data from. So I'll drill down into the hierarchy, and I'll pick my Dynamics 1444 and click Add Device, and then I'll click Next. And again, here we can just simply pick the measurements that we're interested in and where we want to map them in the hierarchy. And the utility will create the measurements and locations for us if they are not already created. Now I'll click the Next button, and now the extraction wizard is presenting us with a trigger setting dialog. This is where we tell Emonitor EM what trigger we want to monitor, and we can create multiple triggers. In this example, we'll just create one. So I'll call it Machine Running, and now I need to associate this with a specific tag in Logix. When I click the little ellipses button here on the right, it opens up a little tag browser, and this will present the main program scoped tags that are Boolean in nature. These are the ones that are most appropriate for trigger tags. They're either on or they're off. So I'll just pick a trigger on tag and click OK. And then I can decide what the condition is. So I can specify what the interval is. As long as that tag is true, I want to collect data every 30 minutes. And of course, you can set this to whatever makes sense for your particular application. Alternatively, I could set up a condition where if the tag is true, I only want to take a single collection. In this case, we'll tell it we want to collect every 30 minutes as long as the tag remains true. So I'll click the Create button, and the tag is added to the list. I can repeat this process for additional tags as necessary. I'm going to click Next to continue. And now the extraction wizard opens a bind mapped items to trigger. So in the pane on the left, we have a list of whatever triggers we have configured. In this case, I only have one. So as you can see, this gives you the ability to define multiple triggers and unload different types of data depending on which trigger is active. In this case, I'm selecting just the single trigger. And note that you may have to expand the extraction wizard window in order to see the Add button. So let's click the Add button. Here, in this case, I'm just going to pick all of the measurements that I have currently mapped. And I'll say OK. Now I've assigned all of these measurements to this particular trigger. I'll click Next. And like before, if the Dynamics 1444 is configured to also provide phase data, I can make that selection here. In this case, I'm just clicking Next. Now, since we are using trigger data collection, notice that our extraction interval dialog is now grayed out. So all we have to do is save the extraction. Click the Finish button, and we are ready to go. I can start these extractions, and the data will begin collecting only when the trigger condition is true. I hope you found this information helpful. Thanks for watching.